Ever left a family gathering early just to protect your peace?
Picture this quiet evening unfolding in my cramped Ohio living room, where the air conditioner hums persistently like it's struggling through its final breaths. And I'm gently rocking my 4-year-old niece Lily to sleep because my sister Jenna has once again bailed on her date night plans, leaving me to navigate the familiar rhythm of lullabies and soft sways that remind me of the stability I try so hard to maintain in this chaotic family dynamic despite my own life feeling like a perpetual balancing act on a tightrope stretched thin by divorce papers and endless work hours. As Lily's eyelids finally flutter shut and her small chest rises and falls in peaceful rhythm against my shoulder, my phone suddenly buzzes on the scarred wooden coffee table, its screen illuminating the dim space with an insistent glow that pulls me from the momentary calm, forcing me to carefully shift her tiny form onto the worn couch cushions while draping over her the Afghan knitted by my late grandmother, whose memory still lingers in every thread as a symbol of the simpler times before financial strains and family secrets began eroding our bonds like relentless Midwest winters. The text from my mother Ellen arrives first in this unwelcome interruption, featuring a brightly filtered selfie of her lounging poolside in Hawaii with my father Frank grinning beside her, a colorful lei draped around his neck and tropical cocktails clutched in their hands, the accompanying message declaring boldly that they are on vacation and have cleaned out the family savings to fund this so-called paradise escape, which they describe as worth every single penny spent on sun-soaked indulgences and carefree days far from the gray realities of suburban life back home. Those words about the family savings strike me with the force of a sudden downpour during a drought because for the past decade, I have been the one quietly funneling every spare dollar from my accountant's bonuses, overtime shifts at the firm, and even skipped personal luxuries like weekend getaways or new outfits into that joint trust account we established together as a supposed safety net for emergencies, such as funding Lily's future college tuition or covering Dad's anticipated medical needs in his later years, sacrifices that meant foregoing my own dreams of a solo trip to Yellowstone or even basic home repairs because maintaining peace in the Thompson family always fell to me as the dependable middle child who never voiced complaints even when midnight calls came about leaky roofs turning into flooded basements or Dad's minor car fender benders escalating into repair bills that drained my savings faster than a leaky faucet. Staring at the screen in that hushed living room with Lily's soft breathing the only sound breaking the tension building inside me, a bitter laugh escapes my lips unbidden as I type out a response filled with feigned enthusiasm about how amazing it sounds and to enjoy every moment of the sun, but inwardly my thoughts whirl with rapid calculations honed from 15 years of crunching numbers for clients who treat financial advisors like disposable tools rather than lifelines, already piecing together the implications of their audacious move that leaves our collective cushion reduced to scraps while they bask in unearned luxury without so much as a courtesy heads-up to the daughter who's been propping up their retirement fantasies all along. "That's cute," I murmur to the empty room with a sarcasm that tastes like the overbrewed coffee I sip later that night, envisioning those money-grubbing relics of parents finally revealing their entitled cores beneath the facade of familial love. Yet, if they believe for a second that I'll simply smile and absorb this betrayal like all the previous slights, they are sorely mistaken because a plan begins to form in my mind sharper and more precise than any bounce check notice I've ever issued in my professional life. The following morning unfolds with the routine normalcy of pouring cereal for Lily at my small kitchen table where sunlight filters through the blinds in golden slats highlighting the dust motes dancing like unspoken worries. And as she chatters innocently about her dreams of beaches and seashells that unknowingly echo her grandparents' escapade, I discreetly open the banking app on my phone to confirm the devastating truth staring back at me in the form of a balance now hovering at a mere $400. Compared to the $15,000 it held just weeks prior when I last reviewed it during a late-night audit prompted by vague unease. How they managed to execute such large withdrawals without triggering the alerts that should have pinged my notifications remains a puzzle that fuels my growing determination, prompting me to initiate a subtle transfer of funds sufficient to secure Lily's upcoming preschool enrollment fees under the guise of prudent financial housekeeping, though deep down I recognize This is my initial foray into retaliation, a quiet assertion that the well of generosity they have tapped so freely is neither infinite nor forgiving anymore. Throughout the day, as I navigate client meetings filled with tedious discussions of tax deductions and investment portfolios that pale in comparison to the personal stakes weighing on my conscience, Mom sends another barrage of texts overflowing with gushing details about my Thai sunsets and indulgent spa treatments that paint their adventure in strokes of blissful ignorance. And I respond each time with carefully curated positivity complete with innocuous emojis to maintain the illusion of unwavering support while the gears in my brain grind relentlessly on strategies born from years of observing how small fiscal maneuvers can topple even the sturdiest facades. By evening, when Jenna finally calls to express her gratitude for stepping in once more with Lily, her voice carrying that mix of relief and casual entitlement that has become all too familiar in our sibling interactions, I keep my tone light and conversational, steering the dialogue toward mundane topics like the latest office gossip or the unpredictable autumn weather patterns sweeping through our neighborhood, all the while suppressing the simmering resentment that threatens to boil over because even Jenna, with her flighty lifestyle jumping from one retail job to the next, remains blissfully unaware of the deeper fissures cracking open in our family foundation. As I finally tuck Lily into her bed for the night, her small hand clasping mine in a gesture of pure trust that tugs at the softer edges of my resolve, I make a silent vow under the glow of the bedside lamp that this ill-advised vacation fairy tale spun by my parents will conclude not with triumphant returns and fond memories, but with a series of rude awakenings orchestrated through clever incremental steps that restore balance to the scales they've tipped so selfishly in their favor. Yet as the house settles into silence around midnight, with only the distant hum of traffic on the interstate serving as a backdrop to my insomnia, the rail jolt arrives via an unexpected email notification from the bank detailing an anomalous transfer pattern that defies the sunny narratives they've shared online, hinting at layers of deception far more intricate than a simple splurge on paradise getaways, and leaving me wide-eyed in the darkness pondering what other shadows lurk beneath the surface of their paradise posts. The days following that revealing bank notification stretch into a disorienting blur of routine obligations and simmering internal turmoil, where each client meeting at the accounting firm becomes a monotonous backdrop to my racing thoughts about the discrepancies in those withdrawal patterns that refuse to align with the idyllic vacation snapshots. My parents continue to flood our family group chat with images of pristine beaches and over-the-top dinners that mock the financial tightrope I've been walking for years to keep our household afloat amid the fallout of my divorce and the relentless demands of single parenthood blended with sibling support duties. Jenna notices the subtle shifts in my demeanor during her pickup of Lily that weekend, her eyes narrowing with that intuitive sibling radar as she thrusts a crumpled $20 bill into my hand for gas reimbursement while apologizing profusely for yet another last-minute bailout on her social plans, but I deflect the concern with a practice joke about how taxes are the true vacation spoilers in this economy, laughing it off even as a sharp pang tightens in my chest, because revealing the full extent of Mom and Dad's betrayal right then would shatter the fragile normalcy we've all clung to since the family trust was first established as a beacon of collective security rather than the depleted resource it's become under their secretive stewardship. By the time the announcement arrives via a cheerful group text from Mom detailing their impending return from paradise, complete with an invitation to a welcome-home family dinner at our long-standing haunt, that cozy Italian bistro off Route 40 where the marinara clings to your palate like a comforting yet burdensome memory of better times, I have already sketched out the contours of my inaugural substantial countermeasure, a modest yet pointed maneuver designed to deliver a sting without immediate detection, drawing on the fiscal precision that's both my professional armor and personal weapon in navigating these interpersonal minefields. We convene that Thursday evening in the familiar booth that groans under the collective weight of our arrivals, with Jenna launching into animated recaps of her latest retail escapades and Lily blissfully absorbed in scribbling vibrant patterns across the paper placemat that serves as her canvas, amid the aromas of garlic bread wafting from the kitchen like an olfactory lure pulling us into the pretense of unity, while Mom dives headfirst into her vacation chronicles, her skin still radiating an Artificial glow from self-tanner under the harsh restaurant fluorescence, and Dad offering supportive nods punctuated by his trademark sheepish smiles that now strike me as veils for deeper deceptions forged in the fires of unchecked indulgences. The evening progresses with deceptive smoothness, plates of pasta and laughter exchanging like currency until the bill arrives, landing on the scarred wooden table like an unspoken accusation, prompting Dad to declare with theatrical generosity that he will cover it this time, extracting his wallet with a flourish reminiscent of a high roller at a casino he has no business frequenting and sliding his credit card toward the waitress whose return mere minutes later carries the unmistakable pallor of declined transactions, the awkward murmur escaping her lips about insufficient funds hanging in the air denser than the steam rising from the uneaten tiramisu slices. Mom's face flushes a mottled red beneath her tan. Dad fumbles through his pockets for cash that proves woefully inadequate, and Jenna casts that expectant glance my way, the one that has historically summoned me as the family's default benefactor, but on this occasion, I maintain my composure, sliding my own card across the table with a serene smile and a casual remark that no worries, it's all good, underscoring the gesture with an undercurrent of irony they remain oblivious to as the transaction clears, deducting another chunk from my already beleaguered checking account, which has borne the brunt of their property tax payments and utility overages for the past several quarters without reciprocal acknowledgement. Departing the restaurant into the crisp autumn night air thick with the scent of fallen leaves and distant wood smoke, I experience the initial surge of cunning gratification from this orchestrated moment of reversal, their profuse thanks echoing hollowly in my ears, yet laced with an undercurrent of unease when I later retreat to the solitude of my home and immerse myself in a digital archive of family photographs pulled from shared albums on my laptop, the images from past holidays where we posed around, discussions of the trust fund now appearing in a new light, with one particular snapshot from last Christmas capturing Mom's phone screen in the background, displaying icons that bear an uncanny resemblance to those of online betting platforms, the kind that ensnare retirees in cycles of false hope and mounting losses. Dismissing the observation at first as mere overreach born from paranoia, I proceed to delve into the detailed bank statements I had retrieved earlier, cross-referencing timestamps against the chronology of their Hawaiian itinerary and uncovering a disconcerting sequence of transactions that diverge sharply from expenditures on accommodations or excursions, suggesting instead a pattern of habitual wagers placed from afar that erode the narrative of innocent rejuvenation they've peddled so convincingly. Just as these revelations begin to coalesce into a more ominous picture, my phone vibrates with an incoming call from an unfamiliar area code, the voice on the other end identifying as a representative from their credit union, inquiring about flagged suspicious activities on linked accounts, a serendipitous development that aligns perfectly with the escalation I have in mind, prompting me to conclude the conversation politely while my pulse quickens with anticipation. And that night, after Jenna's subsequent text expressing vague indebtedness for the dinner coverage, I access the online portal for our shared utilities and deftly redirect the impending payment obligation squarely onto their registered address, allowing the accrual of late penalties to mount like inexorable waves against a crumbling shoreline, a petty, yet profoundly satisfying act of retribution that reaffirms my agency in this lopsided equation, even as it stirs a whisper of doubt about the path I'm treading. The true pivot arrives unexpectedly later that same evening as I absent-mindedly scroll through Dad's inadvertently synced contacts from a previous family device share, stumbling upon a forgotten login credential for a gambling application, the dashboard revealing an active balance and recent activity logs that illuminate the depths of their concealed vice, glaring back at me like a stark indictment of the trust we once professed to uphold. Waking up to the relentless patter of rain against my bedroom window the morning after uncovering that damning gambling dashboard feels like the heavens themselves are conspiring to mirror the storm brewing within me, where every drop echoes the erosion of trust that's defined my role in this family for far too long as the steadfast provider who absorbs the shocks without a murmur, while my parents Ellen and Frank indulge in their hidden vices that now reveal themselves as the true architects of our financial downfall, transforming what I once viewed as innocent retirement quirks into a voracious cycle of bets and losses that have siphoned away the very foundation meant to secure our collective future amid the economic uncertainties that have plagued middle-class American lives since the Great Recession's lingering shadows. As I brew a pot of coffee robust enough to jolt clarity into my fogged mind each sip, fortifying the resolve to confront this revelation methodically rather than impulsively, I resist the urge to dial mom immediately and unleash the barrage of accusations that bubble up like overboiled resentment, opting instead for the calculated approach ingrained in my accounting profession, where evidence trumps emotion and precision disarms deception, allowing me to spend the early hours cross-referencing the application's transaction logs against our shared bank history on my laptop screen's unforgiving glow that illuminates patterns of escalating wagers coinciding with their Hawaiian timeline, suggesting not just escapism, but a desperate bid to recoup losses through offshore poker tournaments that promise quick windfalls but deliver only deeper pits. Jenna arrives mid-morning unannounced with Lily in tow for an impromptu playdate, her arms laden with grocery bags from a spontaneous shopping spree that she confesses was funded by an unexpected tip from a customer, the kind of serendipitous windfall she always seems to attract while I scrape by unsalaried predictability. And as the afternoon unfolds amid the cheerful chaos of spilled juice boxes and toddler giggles echoing through my modest living room, I find momentary reprieve in wiping down counters and engaging in light banter about Lily's latest crayon masterpieces that depict fantastical beaches unknowingly paralleling her grandparents' ill-gotten paradise. Yet even in these domestic rhythms, my thoughts drift inexorably back to those digital breadcrumbs, the ones that paint Dad's retirement not as golden leisure, but as a gambler's frenzy where every click of a virtual chip chips away at the legacy I toiled to build for my niece's sake. Humor seeps into my internal monologue despite the gravity-awry amusement at the irony of those freeloading fossils wagering away my hard-earned stability while preaching fiscal prudence during family holidays. But this levity sours swiftly when I consider the broader implications for Lily, whose trust fund portion within our joint account now dangles precariously close to evaporation, threatening to leave her vulnerable in a world where college costs soar like unchecked inflation and opportunities narrow for those without a safety net woven from familial sacrifice. By late afternoon, with Jenna dozing on my couch exhausted from her shift at the mall, I retreat to my office nook under the pretense of checking emails, pulling up public records databases that my professional access facilitates to unearth a tangled web of liens and overdue notices tethered to their suburban home, the documents detailing gambling debts accrued through a network of online platforms that target empty nesters with seductive ads promising excitement in exchange for modest entry fees that balloon into insurmountable obligations over time, a discovery that ignites a moral crossroads within me where the temptation to expose this folly to the entire family tempts like a siren's call, yet hesitation grips me tightly because shattering their facade could unravel the threads holding us together, however frayed, and force Jenna into the caretaker role she's ill-equipped to handle, leaving Lily adrift in the fallout. The audience of my conscience, those imagined confidants who might judge my delving as an invasion of privacy, would likely decry my choices as overly vengeful, but such disagreement fuels my determination because they haven't wired the last $5,000 to avert utility shutoffs or medical copays, all while maintaining the smile of the dutiful daughter. And so, in the quiet hush of early evening, I place an anonymous call to their primary credit card issuer, my voice modulated to neutrality, as I report irregularities in the Hawaiian charges, citing the suspicious timing and volumes that align with the gambling logs I've scrutinized, knowing full well that this tip will trigger an investigation, freezing their lines of credit without directly implicating me in the fray, a partial revenge that delivers a witty jolt of disruption mirroring the chaos they've inflicted on my budget. Yet as I disconnect, the line, a flicker of guilt pierces the satisfaction, making me question whether I'm evolving into the antagonist of this narrative or merely the balancer restoring equilibrium to a tilted scale. Jenna stirs then, inquiring with sleepy concern if everything's all right during my prolonged absence, and I fabricate a seamless excuse about work deadlines piling up like autumn leaves, the lie slipping out effortlessly, honed from years of shielding siblings from parental shortcomings. But the genuine pivot materializes later that night in a voicemail from Mom, her tone laced with uncharacteristic vulnerability as she confesses through choked sobs that they borrowed a bit more from the fund than plan to cover some unexpected costs during the trip, her words halting on allusions to Dad's health concerns or perhaps something graver that she trails off without elaborating, leaving the message truncated and my heart pounding in the ensuing silence, broken only by the intensifying rain outside that amplifies the pulse of uncertainty about what deeper confessions or concealments await in the layers yet to be peeled back. That truncated voicemail from Mom lingers in my mind like an unfinished ledger entry through the subsequent weekend, where mundane errands, such as clipping coupons for grocery runs that stretch my budget to its limits and navigating the aisles of our local supermarket filled with the sense of fresh produce and overpriced organics, serve as a stark counterpoint to the opulent illusions she's painted in her Paradise Dispatches, transforming every casual scroll through social media into a gauntlet of resentment as their feed overflows with post-vacation montages of sunburned group selfies laden with cheap souvenirs and captions extolling the virtues of recharging one's soul in tropical bliss, while I recharge my indignation in the confined space of my home office, surrounded by stacks of unpaid bills that underscore the disparity between their carefree indulgences and my grinding reality of single motherhood intertwined with involuntary familial philanthropy. Jenna extends an invitation midweek for yet another gathering, this time framed as a casual celebration of their homecoming at her cluttered apartment, where the air always carries a faint aroma of takeout remnants and laundry detergent, the kind of impromptu affair that masks deeper tensions under layers of forced conviviality. And as I arrive bearing a modest bottle of discount wine with a smile that conceals the fallout from my anonymous fraud report, which has predictably snarled their credit lines into temporary paralysis, I sense the undercurrents shifting like sand beneath the surface of polite small talk exchanged over steaming plates of boxed pasta that Jenna has hastily assembled amid Lily's playful pursuits of the family dog, whose enthusiastic barks punctuate the evening's fragile harmony. The atmosphere thickens palpably when Mom attempts to settle the tab for incidental extras like additional sodas and dessert slices, with a handful of crumpled bills that fall short by a frustrating margin, her gaze flicking toward me with the habitual expectation of intervention. Yet on this pivotal juncture, I intercede, once more extending my card with an air of unflappable graciousness, but fortified by the strategic maneuver executed that very morning, wherein, leveraging my intimate knowledge of the trust's fine print clauses and a few deft adjustments through the administrative portal, I have effectively frozen access to the joint assets, rendering their draws impossible without my explicit override. A clever lockdown disguised as routine maintenance that promises to deliver a cascade of denials, mirroring the voids they've carved into our shared security. Family sticks together, I quip lightly to the group, the phrase dripping with unspoken irony that sails unnoticed over their heads as the payment processes smoothly, deducting yet another slice from my reserves already depleted by prior bailouts. Yet this infusion of control elicits a subtle thrill of witty retribution, the kind that accountants savor in quiet victories over fiscal imbalances, even as Jenna's sidelong glance hints at her growing suspicion of the dynamics at play without fully grasping the precipice we've approached. Clearing the dishes amid the clatter of plates and Lily's innocent queries about whether Grandma's trip money could fund a special birthday outing for her trust account, which unwittingly spotlights the vulnerability of that very portion now imperiled by their depredations, forces a momentary hitch in my composure, the child's wide-eyed earnestness tugging at the ethical fibers that the imagined audience might condemn as I indirectly entangle the younger generation in this web of adult deceptions. Through my escalating interventions, a dilemma that stirs internal discord, because while the partial revenge of the asset freeze asserts my boundaries, it risks contaminating the purity of familial bonds with the taint of calculated reprisal, making me question in fleeting pangs whether the ends justify the means in this protracted battle for equity. Humor infiltrates my private reflections, a sardonic chuckle at the notion of Dad's midlife escapades hitting the jackpot in all the wrong ways with bets on virtual tables rather than honest labor, but this levity fractures when during the post-meal lull I orchestrate an inadvertent spill of red wine across Dad's phone propped on the coffee table, the crimson stain providing cover for a swift wipe-down that affords a glimpse of a clandestine text thread buried in his notifications, suggestive of Entanglements beyond mere gambling, perhaps an illicit liaison with a fellow casino enthusiast, spouse the fragmented messages laden with coded urgency that hint at alibis fabricated during their getaway, adding a layer of personal betrayal to the financial one and deepening the chasm of uncertainty about the full scope of their deceptions. As the evening winds down with hugs and farewells exchanged under the glow of Jenna's porch light, their vehicle pulling away into the night, accompanied by a flurry of grateful texts that belie the confusion soon to dawn upon discovery of the frozen funds, I retreat to my car, savoring the poignant sting of this latest gambit, their bewilderment manifesting in delayed follow-ups. That night yet, the equilibrium shatters abruptly with an incoming call from the emergency room staff detailing Dad's acute chest pains, described as minor, but insistent enough to warrant immediate attention. The terse details relayed over the line, propelling me from the driver's seat into a frantic drive through rain-slicked streets, my mind reeling with the terror that my machinations might have precipitated this crisis, forcing an unforeseen confrontation amid the sterile urgency of hospital corridors where truths long buried threaten to erupt without mercy. The sterile scent of antiseptic and stale coffee permeates the hospital waiting room where I arrive in the pre-dawn hours after that frantic call from the ER staff, my hands gripping the steering wheel, white-knuckled through rain-lashed streets that blur the line between my escalating maneuvers and the potential catastrophe they've unleashed on Dad's fragile health, the fluorescent lights overhead buzzing like accusatory insects as I pace the linoleum floors worn smooth by countless anxious footsteps, each circuit amplifying the leaden weight of guilt settling in my stomach, because the asset freeze I implemented with such calculated precision now looms as a possible catalyst for this stress-induced episode where medical jargon tossed about by passing nurses hints at elevated blood pressure tied to undisclosed worries that mirror the fiscal pressures I've only recently begun to unravel in full. Mom materializes moments later, her appearance disheveled with hair uncombed and eyes swollen from tears that she doesn't bother to hide, collapsing into the vinyl chair beside me and unleashing a torrent of fragmented confessions in hushed tones that finally pierce the veil of denial she's maintained throughout their Hawaiian charade, admitting that the gambling odyssey commenced innocuously during Dad's post-retirement ennui, evolving into a compulsive spiral through online platforms that lured him with visions of supplemental income to offset their fixed pension shortfalls, but spiraled into crushing debts, necessitating the trust fund raid as a desperate gambit to fund a high-stakes poker tournament in paradise, where a single win could ostensibly erase the arrears, yet instead amplified the losses, leaving them hollowed out and terrified of the consequences cascading back into our everyday lives. I absorb these revelations with a nod that masks the whirlwind of emotions churning within, empathy flickering for their plight, which echoes my own scrambles in the divorce's aftermath when every paycheck stretched like taffy to cover mortgages and childcare, yet this compassion clashes violently with the vengeful ledger I've kept, tallying years of their silence on these addictions while I funneled resources to sustain the illusion of stability for all of us, including Jenna and Lily, who deserve better than this inherited quagmire of poor choices disguised as familial legacy. Jenna bursts through the automatic doors shortly thereafter, Lily bundled in pajamas clutched to her side, the urgency in her voice demanding a full accounting of the situation as the waiting area swells, with our collective tension prompting an impromptu family huddle in a corner alcove away from prying ears, where under the harsh glare of vending machine lights I orchestrate the climax by methodically presenting the amassed evidence, not in a blaze of fury, but with the dispassionate clarity of a boardroom audit, laying out bank logs, gambling app screenshots, and the incriminating text fragments from Dad's phone that expose not only the fiscal betrayals, but the additional layer of personal infidelity, his messages alluding to clandestine meetings with a casino acquaintance's wife during their trip, a revelation that crumples Mom's composure into audible sobs, while Dad wheezes faint apologies from his curtained bed, the air thickening with the raw exposure of deceptions that have festered unchecked for months, if not years. My culminating act of retribution unfolds with measured wit as I access the hospital's secure Wi-Fi to unfreeze a precise portion of the joint assets sufficient to cover Dad's immediate medical expenses and diagnostics, but simultaneously reroute the remainder into a fortified subtrust designated exclusively for Lily's future, shielding it from further encroachments and framing the adjustment as accrued interest on the unspoken family loans they've defaulted upon, the declaration landing with a sharpness that elicits pleas for mercy from both parents, their tears flowing freely in a bid for absolution that tugs at the frayed edges of my resolve, making me confront the moral ambiguity of whether this balanced expose restores justice or irreparably fractures the bonds we've strained to preserve amid the broader American tapestry of intergenerational dependencies where adult children like me often shoulder burdens meant for shared resilience. As dawn breaks, filtering pale light through the rain-streaked windows, and the doctors pronounce Dad stable for discharge pending lifestyle reforms, I gather my things, preparing to depart with Jenna and Lily in tow, the hollow triumph settling over me like a fog, because while the scales tip toward equilibrium, the imagined audience of observers might decry my choices as excessively punitive, wondering if I've demolished the family unit in pursuit of personal vindication or merely enforced the accountability long overdue in our dynamic. Driving home through streets now slick with receding puddles, Lily dozing peacefully in the backseat, a final text from Mom arrives, its content cryptic and laden with hints of an untold dimension, perhaps a concealed inheritance they dipped into not out of greed, but to safeguard from greater perils, leaving me to ponder in the quiet cab whether the true betrayal resides in their actions or in my unyielding pursuit of reckoning, and if forgiveness emerges as another precarious gamble in the endless game of familial ties where some questions dissolve into the ether unanswered forever.